back, guys. Alright, so we're up to episode 5 now of this Neo Vector tutorial, where we are following this XNA tutorial to create a Geometry Wars clone. So in this is a fair bit along now, so if you would like to start from episode 1, please click on the link up here. And the URL for the tutorial that I'm following is in the description down below just here as well. Alright, so make sure you have a look at those first if you haven't seen any of these videos before. But today we're handling a whole new section, and we've gone through collision detection, creating enemies. Where last episode we worked on the enemy spawner, so now we've got enemies spawning at different rates as the game progresses, and now we're on to scoring and lives. So this is where we turn this this spaceship simulation, I suppose, into an actual video game where the player starts to have some goals to achieve. So what we're going to try to do is have the player start on a certain number of lives. I think we're going to start with 4 lives to begin with, and then we're going to have a score to keep track of how the player is doing in terms of how many enemies he's killing. And we also want to add in something a little bit more interesting, like a multiplier. So whenever the player kills an enemy, he gets an increase in multiplier, which then affects how much he can score. And another little added feature is when the player earns more than 2,000 points, he gets an extra life as well, so we can keep prolonging his game. So with all of these new features comes a whole new class to store them in and to handle how they all work. So we're starting a new static class called the player status. And let's go have a look at my code, because there are a few little changes that I've had to make. Alright, so here's my player status class, so I've created it already. There are a few references to time, like the multiplayer time left and the multiplier expiry time. Now, if you've been following along, you'll know that I'm using a variable step frame rate. So a lot of the time when I have to deal with time, I sort of had to convert it from using a frame rate based timing to real world time. Now in this case, we're just using real world time to time whether the multiplier should expire or how much time's left on the multiplier, that sort of thing. So there isn't really any changes compared to the tutorial. So alright, let's go through our player status. Okay, so we're declaring a couple of variables here. In the tutorial they use a shortcut for get set. Instead, if you look at my code, listed in the GitHub by the way, GitHub link below in the description, I sort of go the long-handed way and write out the live score multiplier accesses fairly explicitly rather than using the shorthand. Up to you how you want to do that, obviously. Alright, so the first little bit here, we've got the initializer, which is for the player status class, and immediately we run a method called reset. So instead of setting all of these values up straight away in the initialization, we want to have a reset method so that when the player, basically this reset method gets run when the player loses all of his lives, and we just reset the score back to 0, reset the multiplier back to 1, and yeah, basically restart the game again because the player died. Okay, so that's that one. Now jumping into the update method for the player status. So every update cycle, what we're doing here is we're checking if the player has a additional multiplier applied, and if he does, so say the multiplier is 2 now because he's killed a certain number of enemies. Every time he kills an enemy, we give him an additional multiplier. But we also need to set an expiry time for that multiplier, so that say he kills 3 enemies and then he hasn't killed any enemies for like 2 seconds or something, we're going to reset the multiplier back to 1. Okay, so the way this works is, so every update cycle, if the player has a multiplier applied, Then we subtract some time from the multiply time left setting. Multiply time left variable. And then it just continues on. But if subtracting that time resulted in the multiplier time left to be less than 0, then we're going to reset that multiplier back to 1. Okay, so basically there's an expiry time on the player's multiplier. You can't just sit there and not kill anything for a long time. So after, the way I've set it is after 1 second here, multiplier expiry time. After 1 second, the multiplier of not killing anything, the multiplier gets reset back to 1. Okay, so that's in the update method. So that happens every update. And then to help with what happens when a player kills something else, we want to add points to it. So when he kills an enemy, we want the enemy class to be able to access this add points method so that we can add points to the player's score when the enemy dies. So this add points goes into the enemy class and it gets called when an enemy dies. And what that does is first check if the player is alive or not, because if the player is dead, then don't worry about it, don't need to apply any points. If it's gone past this bit, then we get the score and we add the number of points that killing the enemy was worth, and then multiply that value by the multiplier that's currently in place. And then okay, so this is an interesting bit. So this is the while. So basically, the way we want to set this up is whenever the player gets 2,000 points added to his score, he gets an extra life. Okay, so the way this works is the reason why it's in a while loop, and the while the score is greater or equal to score for extra life. We keep adding lives on. So if he's killed one other enemy during this update loop, right, and then he has gotten a score of say 4,000, this loop will keep running through until the score for extra life value is eventually greater than the current score. So if he's killed something and that kill was worth 4,000 points, he will immediately get granted 2 lives before anything else happens in the game. So once he gets to this bit, keeps granting lives until score for extra life is now then greater than score, and then it continues on. We also need another helper method here for increasing the multiplier. So so first we check if the player is dead when we're going to increase the multiplier. Basically this gets run every time an enemy gets killed as well. So under the enemy's one-shot method. And so when we increase the multiplier, we then reset the multiplier that's time left back up to 1 second, which is my multiplier expiring time. So he has to keeps killing within 1 second, and then the multiplier keeps going up. If he delays for more than 1 second, then basically this doesn't get run, and therefore the multiplier time left starts getting degraded from the normal update run in this section here. Yeah, this bit here. Okay, and then he's got the kill, so we increase the multiplier by one increment. Then we've got 2 other helper methods here, which just gives access to the multiplier and the lives variables or attributes. So reset multiplier just sets the multiplier back to 1. Basically, we run that when he is dead, and also to further up here when it expires. So he hasn't killed anything for a while. And then we have a look at remove life here, and all that does is when the player dies, so in the player's was killed, so in player kill we run the remove life, which all from the player status, which all that does is just subtract a life from the player. Yep, and then so one interesting thing with that is when the player reaches 0 live, so when player.lives is less than 1, we run the player status.reset, which is player status, and .reset is way up here if you remember. And that's why we have resets separated. Oh, well, that's why we have all these initializations separated out from the constructor, so that we can do that when the player dies, right? So resets the score back to 0, because at that point, every time he dies before 0 lives, the score doesn't change. It just keeps going up as he kills enemies. So it only gets reset back to 0 when we run the reset. Alright, so that's that new class. If we have a look at the tutorial, after writing all of that stuff down, we've got one little interesting thing here, and that's drawing all of these values onto the screen. So if we have a look at the game again, the game root, we now need to draw all those values to the screen. So under the draw method in your game root class, you'd have to write all of this stuff up, and because player status keeps tracks of all the lives, the score, and the multiplier, it's really easy to draw. But because we're implementing this in MonoGame, it's slightly different how we add the strings, the draw sprites, what's it called? Font sprites to the game. So in the tutorial, he says, here we go. So sprite font in the content project. Yeah, so I load it in like we've done with the other textures in the art.load. So we have a look at this in our art.load. You see how it's slightly different to how we've done it in the XNA version. Basically, if you have a look at this, the art.load function, I've done it a little bit differently. So we've got the instance of the game root, and then we do the .content.load and then sprite font, and I've called it font. So that's in terms of code, we just pretty much follow what we've done with all the texture 2Ds, except we use a sprite font. Now, a little tricky bit here, if we look back at the tutorial, when we're loading the font file, what you need to do is you need to download this Nova Square font. So I'll just go to that link now. So to get this working, you'll run into an error if you don't install the font first. So you jump over the font. If you go click select this font, this is one of those Google fonts. And then in here, there's a little download button. So you hit download, and it'll download it into this little zip file here. So if we open it, okay, hang on. Put WinRAR. And I'll just drop it on my desktop here to show you. So it'll come as a TTF file. So you drop it in, just double click on it, and then click on install. And I've already installed it, that's why I'm getting this error. So make sure you install it. Okay, stop that. And it'll be successfully installed if it's the first time you've installed it. Then in Visual Studio, you just need to restart your Visual Studio so it picks up that this new font exists now and you've got it. And where are we going? Okay, so, and then the next part is in your content project, if you set it up the same way as me, you can create a new font here, or you can use the one, either get the code from the GitHub repository, which I'll put a link in the description for you. And then you can have a look inside let's see, projects. And have a look in here, you'll have a font.sprite font file inside the assets. And if we look at that, if you're using the games version of it, so the one in the tutorial, it gives you a packet of a zip file to download, like all the assets for the game, all the sounds and everything. it'll have a font name called More, and the reason why they put that in there and said to use that More font name is because not everyone has that Nova Squared font installed. But because you do now, all you have to do is just change that to Nova Square. Nova Square. Ah. And then save that out. So I'm not going to save it because I don't need to. And if you have a look at my content project now, like it's just like Nova Square. And then when you open it up in Content Manager, so I open up my Content Manager, and you go add, so file, edit, sorry, add existing, and then you go to wherever that font file is, you go open, and then you have to go copy file to directory. Now, this is grayed out for me because I've already got it in here. Just go copy file to directory, and then it'll show up here, and then you can hit the build button, and it'll build it successfully. Okay, but if you don't have the Nova Square font installed, then you don't have to use that one. If you don't have it installed on your computer, then you'll get an error here because it'll say, that font doesn't exist. I can't build it. Okay, you can just change it to Arial or something if you want. You don't have to use that font. But yeah, so that's that. And then the other parts that you need to put in is under the enemy class and was shot. So whenever an enemy gets shot, you need to put in run the increase multiplier and the increase add points. And under the player ship, oh yeah, we saw this already. Under player ship, when he gets and the kill method, when he gets killed, we want to remove one of his lives and then reset the game if his lives has reached 0. And yeah, I think that's about it. So then we've got under the game rig, we've just got all of your drawing here, and we're using the new font that we've added into MonoGame. So we'll just hit run on this and let's show you how it all works. Alright, here we go. Get that out of the way. Alright, so you can see we've got the score up here. I'll just fire the ship up. And a multiplier. So the multiplier is now applying. And whenever we kill an enemy, we're getting a score. So I've set the, oh yeah, I need to go through that. So I've set the Seeker and the Seeker to 2 points. So these little yellow guys are Seekers. And the Wanderers to 1 point. You can see the lives here. So every time I die, we subtract from the lives. So alright, let's show you that. So how to set the lives on your enemy, the point value on your enemy. So under your enemy class, you've also got to have a new attribute. The new attribute is point value here. So you can see I've set it up as like an accessor here. So we have private for the set so that only the enemy class can access it. Yeah, let's have a look where that gets put in. Alright, so I've set this up. I don't know if it's the same as the tutorial because I don't ever look at any of that source code. Basically, I've got in the constructor, you have to when you're creating a new enemy, you have to set how many points that enemy is worth. And then we initialize point value with this that initialization value. And if we keep going down, the other thing, because I've set that up there, now under the create seeker and the create wanderer and any other enemy that you ever want to create, you have to have initialize the enemy object with a point value. So say under create seeker, you see I've set seekers to have a point value of 2 and I've set wanderers to have a point value of 1. Okay, I think that's a good way to do it because next time when I just want to create a new enemy, right? I don't want to have to dig around and figure out how to give it how many points it should be worth. So yeah, so that's I think that's it. All right, guys. Hopefully that was helpful to you if you're following the tutorial. The next video, what are we doing in the next video? Next video, we're implementing high scores by looks of things. Every time I do these videos, I don't actually look at happening next until I just shoot this video. All right. So yeah, we're looking at high scores next. And if you look at the code, once again, I always sign off with, make sure you take a look at my GitHub if this video wasn't enough for you to understand. I always fill all of the code with lots of comments, more comments than usually needed, even for basic things in the code. It's just to help me understand and help you guys understand if you don't pick it up straight away. Yep, that's it, guys. All right, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.